Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. In our previous episode, we looked specifically at value in motion and what that concept means and how it necessitates reinvention of business models. Today, we are going to delve into the concept a little bit further, looking specifically at business model reinvention, getting the timing of the reinvention right, and PwC's business model reinvention pressure index. I'm joined by Dirk Mostert. He's the lead economist in terms of sustainability at PwC. And Dirk is going to unpack a little bit more detail for us what is meant by business model reinvention and specifically the business model reinvention pressure index. Dirk, thank you so much for joining me. So let's start with the basics. What is the business model reinvention pressure index and how does this link to value in motion?
Sure, thanks, Lulu. So the BMR pressure index is really a strategic timing tool. So it flows straight from the value in motion principles we spoke about last time. And essentially with value in motion, we spoke about how one needs to look through one's value chain up and down the supply chain, as well as cross industries. We spoke about how this can play out strategically in about 10 years' time. So how do we time that? So that's exactly where the BMR pressure index comes in. It's about timing when the pressure in your sector will be at a level where you'll be successful in transforming your business. And we look at 6 indicators. So firstly, it's about sector performance. So especially in the traditional sense, products and services, where there's pressure on profitability. And that's usually driven by innovation that occurs. So that's another indicator. And then new market entrants seeing market attractiveness in the industry. So there's pressure on the one side for profitability, but you actually have many market entrants. So there's still market attractiveness or sector attractiveness. This can be brought about by sector shocks. So that could be global shocks like COVID or tariffs, and also regulatory change that brings upheaval and volatility that allows for opportunity to reinvent. And lastly, we see this play out in actual BMR intensity, and that really means market share redistribution between especially traditional market players and that flow to new entrants.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most complex things to get the timing right in terms of when you need to reinvent your business. And I think this is a fantastic quantitative or insightful way to actually prioritize that. Now, if we move a little bit to Africa specifically, how can African countries respond to value in motion, and how can the business model pressure index actually help Africa?
So that's very important, because with the research over the last 30 years that PwC did about this BMR pressure index, it usually shows that when 5 or 6 of these indicators spike together, usually business model reinvention and successful ones follow soon after, 2 to 3 years maximum. In Africa, those timelines can be much faster because there's leapfrogging opportunities, because of there's no legacy systems in terms of infrastructure or technologies. So we see that leapfrogging take place. Then there's also resource constraints in Africa. And that's always been the case. But what we've seen is businesses are really good in Africa to innovate and to find ways of crossing industry boundaries and also thinking through the value chain. And then there's also regional plays that they can look at. So with that being said, it's really important for them to use this tool to time that transition or the reinvention and when that could occur, but to use this and to localize. We understand that Africa isn't a country. There are very specific nuances playing out within each of these industries.
Incredibly interesting. Can you give us an example of a case study where this is played out in Africa?
So in South Africa, from the research, it was clear that pressure was building up in the telcos industry in the early 2010s. And the reason for that was the traditional products and services, voice and data services, were competing against one another. These different major traditional players were selling more or less the same sort of products and services. So there was margin pressure to compete for customers. And at the same time, we saw a proliferation of digital transformation, apps being developed with fintech companies moving into the space onto one's phones, and so smartphones being taken up. And this connected customers in a much different way. And at that time, MTN, with their mobile money initiatives, were at the right place, at the right time to play into what we've called in the value in motion, where we've moved from traditional industries to these growth domains, not only in how we connect, but actually how we fund and insure. So through the mobile money initiatives, they could connect these two growth domains. And this led to their traditional competitors scrambling to gain control of data and voice services, while MTN played in a completely different growth domain.
So, if you're an African leader or business leader, or you need to give an African business leader advice, how should they interpret the business pressure index differently given our unique context?
And I think it's so important to think about the localization of how a sector operates within your territory. And again, in Africa, regional plays are so, so important. We're far away from many supply chains, it's quite long supply chains. So thinking regionally is incredibly important. And then it's also important to understand the stakeholders and the communities that play a role in your organization and who you serve. And then also the resources and those constraints, thinking outside the box to look at other industries for joint venture opportunities.
So, how should businesses in Africa be preparing for this? What should they be doing?
I think it's very important to track this BMR intensity index. It's with those 6 indicators, it's something one can track and one can develop to monitor. But then at the same time, it's all about business model reinvention. And what does that mean? It means that while you are tracking when the pressure would be at a point where transformation is at the core of what one needs to do, one needs to think about how you are innovating in terms of your operating model, your business model, your energy model, where you source your energy from. Also, looking at competing on tech, how you embed those services, thinking of how you compete for scarce resources, for core skills. Those things are all so important for businesses. Also thinking of how you structure and restructure your regulatory and tax situation. Because when you are looking cross-border, cross-industry, and up and down a value chain, that will certainly impact your tax structures, the regulatory requirements that you need to adhere to. And to do all of this, you need to free up time for your leaders to really think about this and go and have those conversations and strategic planning sessions to really think about what your business will look like going forward.
That was some really practical insights. Is there any other actionable advice that we as PwC and you as a team that's working on BMR would give to our clients?
I think the most important things is think in your business where you feel vulnerable and where you feel that you need agility, and start small. You cannot solve all of these things. You cannot reinvent your business in one go. You need to look at those priority areas. So it's important to prioritize and to ensure that you have the skills to make sure that you can bring this to fruition.
Thank you so much, Dirk. This was then our last episode of 2 episodes, specifically focusing on value in motion. and the Business Model Reinvention Pressure Index. Please, as business leaders, feel free to get in touch with PwC. We can help you look at ways to quantify and prioritize when you need to make those reinvention decisions. We hope to chat to you soon.